And today I want to talk to you about the excruciating love of God in the life of Simon Peter, the apostle. I want to start with a reading from Luke chapter 22, the Gospel of Luke. They seized him and they led him away, that is Jesus, bringing him into the high priest's house. And Peter was following at a distance. And when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and they sat down together, Peter sat down among them. And then a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light and looking closely at him, said, this guy was with him too. So we'll pause there for a moment. So Peter is about to commit his first denial of Christ. How many of you, if you don't mind raising your hands, you know I like that. How many of you have read the story of Peter denying Jesus 3 times, or you've at least heard it before? Okay, it's a pretty famous story. It's a good one to talk about on Easter Sunday because Peter is a story of transformation. Before this event, Jesus and his friends had had one final supper together. Then he went out into the Garden of Gethsemane. He was betrayed for 30 pieces of silver by Judas Iscariot. He was arrested by Roman officers representing Judea, the province in which they lived. And they took him into Jerusalem. He was tried before 2 different sort of kangaroo courts, and he was unjustly declared guilty of blasphemy and insurrection, and he was going to be executed on a cross. All of that stuff's happening. Meanwhile, most of the disciples have run away and fled, and Peter, Simon Peter, who said, I will never leave you, Lord. I'll never leave your side. I will be faithful to you forever. Now Simon Peter is being approached by strangers who recognize him and think he's associated with the guy we're about to crucify. And if you're not aware, being an adult man in cohorts or in cahoots with an insurrectionist like Jesus was supposedly. Again, he was not an insurrectionist, but they declared him one. If you're working alongside an insurrectionist, then you are also guilty, and you too could be tried and executed. And so it was a scary thing for Peter to be associated with Jesus. And so, as you might expect, he's going to deny it. That's the next verse. He denied it, saying, Woman, I don't know him. A little later, someone else saw him and said, You were one of them, meaning one of the disciples. But Peter said, Sir, I am not. And then after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, Certainly this guy was with him. He too is a Galilean. But Peter said, I don't know what you're talking about, and cursed, meaning offered a curse, like, I swear on my own grave, I don't know this guy, right? And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered that the Lord said to him, Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. So Peter went out and he wept bitterly. The word excruciating, ex crucio, out of the cross or from the cross, literally means from a cross, from crucifixion. When we say something is excruciating, we mean it hurts really badly, right? If you visit someone in the hospital and you say, how's the pain? And they say, it's excruciating. You're going to assume it's a 9 or 10 out of 10. It's a powerful word, and it's rooted in the story of Jesus, out of the cross. I would argue that pain, real pain, is often the road to our transformation. And it's not just intense. True excruciating pain, the way God can use it, is sacred. The cross isn't then a detour in the Christian life. It is the path of the Christian life. That's why we don't celebrate Easter Sunday until after we have talked about Good Friday, even Silent Saturday, if we're holy enough. We think about the day in between when Jesus is really dead and everybody's just waiting to see what might happen. It's painful to wait in the dark. Death is an ugly thing, a painful thing. If someone understood the links between the darkness of the cross and the light of the resurrection morning, it was Simon Peter. His life was radically transformed by these events. He was bold. He was outspoken. If you know Peter from Scripture, Simon Peter, son of John, he was passionately committed as a disciple of Jesus. He was hilariously impulsive to the point that I think he embarrassed himself more than once. He confidently declared, Everyone else might bail on you, Jesus, but I will be there. I will never forsake you. I'll never deny you. I'll never leave your side. He thought he was solid. But as soon as pressure was placed upon Peter, all that bravery sort of vanished away. I want you to picture Peter now by that fire, trying to feel safe in the shadows while he's waiting to see what will happen to Jesus, his Lord, his teacher, his friend. And then finally crumbling under the fear of being noticed, not once, but 3 separate times. He failed. He failed. Have you ever failed? When I used to ride motorcycles, I had an older guy in my life who would always tell me, it's not if you will lay down a bike, it's when. When. You will lay down a motorcycle. If you ride enough days for long enough, you will lay down a bike. Somebody will run you off the road. Something will happen. It's not a matter of if, but when. What will you do when it happens? How will you handle that situation? That's failure. That's deeply human, isn't it? We will fail. We start with the boldest of intentions. I think of the biggest commitments in life, like marriage vows or commitments to recovery, when we say we're never going to touch that substance ever again, whatever that thing is. I don't know. I think of spiritual declarations. I'm going to read my Bible every morning this whole year. Maybe it was a New Year's resolution or a weight loss or a diet fad or something. You say, I'm never going to eat McDonald's ever again. Okay, whatever it is. You have these bold intentions and you think, I'm going to do this thing. You get pumped about it. You tell yourself you're going to do it. And then you don't. At some point, you drop the ball. Life happens. The heat rises, confidence evaporates, and we fail. We fail. So the big question in life isn't if we will fail. It's when we fail, how will we respond? How will you react when you fail? Will it break you or will it refine you? Will you run and hide and pretend and place blame, or would you weep and come back for grace, for a second chance? Luke describes the moment vividly, that moment with Jesus and Peter. The rooster crows, Jesus looks up, locks eyes with Peter. Peter, trying to hide from him, can't help but see the expression on Jesus' face, and whatever that look was, he's broken, right? Peter crumbles. He just starts bawling his eyes out. This isn't like polite tears, like, sorry, Jesus. I mean, I think he was heart shattered, broken, sad about it, bitter, and just so shocked at himself. Haven't you felt that? Being surprised at yourself that you were capable of something you did, not really a good thing either? I have felt that. Like after an argument, sometimes I'll think, how could I have said those things? Like, who was that person yelling? That wasn't me. I think that's Peter. I think he's feeling like, that's not me. I don't know who that is that just denied Jesus. That couldn't be me. But Jesus saw Peter. And he saw the Peter that Peter couldn't believe he could be. And we'll see later, Jesus sees another Peter that Peter can't believe he could be. And that's the good thing about grace. God sees what we cannot see. I remember times I've lied to my parents, or maybe you've lied to adults in your life, parents, grandparents, guardians, and they, instead of getting angry, they give you that disappointed look. I think that's the look Jesus must have given Peter. It wasn't a, I'm going to get you look, like you better put that down right now. It's more, my kids know that look. It's more of the one that they don't see as often, which is, let's see if I can do it. It's just like I'm just so disappointed, and I need you to see how sad I am about this, right? I don't know if that was a really good one, but ask my mom. She's really good at it. What? I've given her plenty of opportunities to practice. Yeah. Thank you so much, friend. Thank you. Here's the twist, though. The tears of Peter, they become water in the soil of his metaphorical heart, right? He has planted the seeds of penitence in that moment. He feels broken, and God can use that. God can grow something new from that. The failure of Peter, anybody's failure if they come to Christ, is not a grave. It's not a place of death and endings. It's a place of new beginnings. It's a place of growth. It's a crucible in which things are strengthened and refined and perfected. But we have to let God do his painful work. A womb is a painful place, but it's where birth and life come from, right? But everything about pregnancy is in many ways painful and difficult. That's why we value women soon enough on Mother's Day. We'll celebrate what women's bodies endure in order to give birth, in order to create life. It takes pain to get there. The cross is sort of the womb for Jesus' spiritual rebirth, which becomes our rebirth. He is born again for us. He didn't need to be. right? Jesus is sinless, but he does it for us because we need something new. We need resurrected life. It's not the end, but it is a new beginning. Before the empty tomb of resurrection, before we can sing and celebrate the rest of the day, we have to also come to the cross. Luke goes on and says, when they came to the place that is called Golgotha, or the skull, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them. They have no idea what they're doing. And it was then about the 6th hour, and darkness was over all the land until the 9th hour, while the sun's light failed. Peter wasn't the only one who failed. Even the sun failed to do his job when Jesus was being crucified. The world just doesn't work right sometimes. The curtain of the temple was torn in two. And then Jesus, calling out with a loud voice, said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And having said this, he breathed his last. And he died. And Peter had to watch that happen. I don't know how far away he was, if he had already disappeared into the crowds, if he had gone into hiding, or if he was watching from a distance. But even if he didn't see the events, he would have heard about it afterward. He had to know that Jesus was killed. And he had just denied him 3 times. Before we take communion, which is what we're about to do in the middle of the sermon, it might seem odd, but I think it'll make sense. I want you to remember that on the night that Peter experienced this failure, during these days when he was overzealous and then fell apart, Jesus had offered him bread and wine. Jesus knew that Peter's failure was only hours away, and he still said, this is my body broken and offered for you. This is my blood poured out for you, despite your failure, despite the fact that you will deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. Jesus prophetically knew that Peter would fail, and he still loved him and fed him. The character of Jesus is unchanging. Even when we fail, he's filled with grace and love and mercy. This table, there are trays in the back and trays up front, but this table is set up for people who need grace, people who need another chance, people who are failures, but failures that are ready to change, failures ready to receive God's love. That's who we've prepared this table for today. That's who God has invited to his table. A meal for people who mess up spectacularly and need more grace and more grace. So come to the table today, not because you're doing things right, but because you are deeply loved and because God cares for you even in the darkest moments. And now another reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 21, and this will be for the second half of the sermon. This is the restoration of Peter. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Well, I guess I should set up the scene for you. This is now after the resurrection. They are hanging out on a beach. Jesus was sitting on the shore, cooking up some fish over a fire, and Peter comes to Jesus, and we assume the scene is a little tense because they haven't really gotten to talk since the denials and the death of Christ, and now Jesus is raised from the dead, and Peter has to face him and deal with what he's done. And so he approaches Jesus, and Jesus says, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Then Jesus said, feed my lambs. He asked him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, tend my sheep. And now Jesus asks him the third time. He says, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was grieved because he asked him 3 times, do you love me? He said to him, Lord, you already know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, then feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted, but when you grow old, you'll stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. This he said to show by what kind of death Peter would glorify God, which we later know he was crucified as a disciple. After saying this, Jesus said to Peter, follow me. Follow me. I want you to now picture a second fire. We started the story at a fire near the gate of Jerusalem, going out toward Golgotha, wherever they might have been. I can't pinpoint the location, but it was a dark scene. It was a tense scene. It was filled with bitter emotion. Now we're at another fire, but this one's quite different. Now it's a new morning on a beach somewhere, very likely the same shoreline where Jesus called the young fisherman Peter to follow him in the very beginning. And now he's back on that same beach, sitting next to a fire with Jesus, with fish being grilled and breakfast being served. It's a different sort of scene. Peter, I assume unsure and uneasy, now approaches Jesus. There's no speech prepared. There's no groveling. It's reminiscent of the prodigal son parable. He comes home to the father, and the father stops him and says, hey, let's have a party. You're back. Peter comes to Jesus, and I think he's wondering, is that what this is going to look like? Or am I going to have to make up for my failures? I'm sure he had a million questions, what was going to happen. But instead, he gets a piece of grilled fish and some bread, and he is shown kindness. He's already been forgiven. It's obvious that Jesus has no grudge. He doesn't interrogate Peter. He doesn't say, all right, have a seat, here's some fish, here's some bread, and then passive-aggressively, and what about those denials? I think that's what I would have done. Instead, he just asks Peter a simple yet profound question. Do you still love me? Do you love me? Do you really love me? 3 times he asks him, do you love me? That's not random repetition. It serves a twofold purpose. One, Peter denied Christ 3 times, so he needs 3 chances to reinstate his love. But it's more than that. In ancient Semitic cultures, like Judaism, saying something 3 times made it the superlative. We would just say good, better, best, but they would repeat something 3 times to superlatize it. That's not a word. Maybe it is, I don't know. They would make it the most by saying it 3 times. So it's like Jesus saying to Peter, do you love me? Do you really love me? Do you love me more than everything else? Do you love me the most? That's the question. Do you really, really love me? Peter had once said to Jesus, if everyone falls away, I'll never abandon you. And then he denied him 3 times. It would be hard to believe the words of someone like that, someone who had broken a promise, someone who was so confident and cocky and then fell apart in a moment of need. But Jesus doesn't push him. He doesn't guilt trip him or shame him or bring up the past. He just says, do you love me? Right now, do you love me? Do you love me? It reminds me, Peter's promise from before, it reminds me of like custom wedding vows that people make. They promise, I'll never hurt you, or I'll never say anything mean to you, or we'll never go to bed angry, or, well, that's laughable. I'll always be there. I'll never walk away. I'll never threaten divorce. I'll never do this. I'll never do that. We make these bold promises in relationships all the time. And then life happens, and we don't keep the promises. Jesus isn't looking for poetic promises from Peter. He knew when Peter made the promise that it was bogus. But he also knew that Peter wanted to love him and was trying to prove how much he loved him, that there was heart behind it, even if it was an empty promise, even if it was a false promise. The intentions were good. And God reads the heart, not the outward appearance. So 3 times he gives him a chance to fix it, to reinstate his love. Jesus wanted a love that gets back up after it's knocked down. Jesus wanted Simon Peter to really love him, to give him an opportunity to prove it. So he doesn't erase the past. They don't pretend that it didn't happen, but they continue the story. They're redeeming the past. That's the beauty of Easter, is that it doesn't pretend the cross didn't happen. It makes something good and beautiful come out of that dark place. That's what God does in your life, just like he did for Simon Peter. It's what grace does. It rewrites our story while leaving all the details in place. You don't have to be a new person. You will be a new person, but the old person is swallowed up in the new person. It's not like you have to erase who you were. You get to redeem it and reorient your direction. It's an amazing thing that God does, and it's always restorative, never punitive. Jesus isn't looking for a way to punish Peter here. He doesn't say, now that you're here on the beach, you know how much it hurt when you denied me? Why don't you hold this hot coal for 5 seconds and you'll have an idea of how much that hurt me, and give him some kind of punishment, right? He's not doing anything like that. I just made that up. I have a dark mind. But he doesn't want that. He doesn't want to hurt Peter. He wants Peter to grow and move forward. He wants the relationship to advance, because that's what sincere love looks like. It doesn't seek vengeance. The Apostle Paul tells us that. Love doesn't look for how to get revenge. Love is quick to forgive, patient, always full of mercy. Catherine of Siena says, the human heart is always drawn by love. Think about the coaches when you were a kid who would scream at you and make you feel like an idiot on the field. Did you want to perform really well for those coaches? Probably not. You might have tried to just to avoid punishment, but the coaches you wanted to please, or the teachers in school that you wanted to prove yourself to, were often the ones who loved you and cared for you and made you feel like you had potential. They saw something in you and they kept tapping into that, trying to push you along. It's a much more effective way to help people. Jesus knows that. He leads with love. Not a list of failures, not a guilt trip, not a way to make Peter feel bad, just breakfast at a fire with a friend. Words of kindness. Not condemnation, but an invitation. He doesn't say, prove yourself. He just says, feed my sheep. If you really love me, then let's keep working. Let's do the thing. Let's move along. Peter then goes on to become the rock of the church. That's why we call him Peter, Petros. But his original name was Simon, which means reed, a reed that's easily bent or broken. And Jesus, knowing the future of Peter, changed his name in advance and said, you won't be known as just a reed. You will be known as a reed that became a rock. Immovable, steadfast, sturdy. God had plans for Simon Peter that he could not have imagined. And God has plans for you on this Easter morning. He wants you to understand that he sees your past and your failures. And he has already forgiven you, and he has extended grace to you. Yes, there is a cross, and it's painful, but there is an empty tomb. There is hope. There is new life, new beginnings. James Allison reminds us the resurrection isn't just about Jesus. It's about all of humanity being raised into a new way of being human, a new life, transformation. Remember the story where Peter asked Jesus, how many times do I have to forgive somebody, Lord? 7 times? And Jesus said, try 77 times. And Peter said, what? How could anybody do that? And Jesus said, well, it's impossible for man, but with God, all things are possible. I think Peter was asking a question he had no idea Jesus was answering for him. How many times will you want me to forgive you, Peter? 7 times? You've already cashed in half of those in one night. Almost half, wow. How is there always more grace than sin? Where does it must be that it comes from a God who has an infinite supply. That's why James, in my favorite Bible verse, in James 2:13, it says, mercy triumphs over judgment, because that's who God is. So I wonder, what about you? Maybe you have made vows you didn't keep. Maybe you made vows you couldn't keep, empty promises, promising to be better, promising never to go back, promising to love God more than anything else, and then you didn't. What do you do with that? When you find yourself afraid, inconsistent, distracted, ashamed, a failure, the way Peter felt. Well, the good news is Jesus doesn't replace Peter with someone better, someone who fails less. And he's not looking to replace you. You don't replace your children when they screw up. You help them. You encourage them. Would you stand with me as we close? Simon Peter is restored by Jesus with an invitation instead of condemnation, with love that says, follow me, feed my sheep, follow me, let's keep going. The pain of your failure may feel excruciating. I would say it's past failures that lead you to want to come to church to begin with. What do we do with all this shame and guilt and junk in life? Where do we take that? And maybe that's why you're here. But I'm telling you, as painful as the excruciating stuff might be, don't forget the meaning of the word excruciating. It is from the cross, and God uses the cross to get to the empty tomb. He uses your pain and your failure to lead to your success and your restoration. Life comes after death. Lest a seed fall into the earth and die, it shall not bear fruit. Jesus said, you're going to hurt. You're going to carry a cross. You're going to die. But that will not be the end of your story. In fact, that's only the beginning. And it gets much better from there. Won't you follow me? Pain is born of love. Pain leads to resurrection. So today the question isn't, will you hurt or will you fail? But when life hurts and when you fail, how will you respond? Where will you go with that? What will you do with that? A better question might be, what does God do with it? And Peter's story tells us the answer to that question. He offers grace and mercy. He says, let's keep going. But he does ask you one question. There's one condition. Do you love me? Do you love me? So I'll ask you this Easter morning, before we close in singing, do you love him? Do you love him? I'm not asking, have you proven yourself to him? Or have you done enough for God? Have you done the right things? That's not the question. The question is simply this: do you love him? That's all he asked Simon Peter. It's all he's asking you this morning. And even if the answer is the feeblest, tiniest little mustard-sized seed, yes, if there's just any yes in there, then the resurrection is for you too. Amen.